Hey there, friends. My name is Ann Calvillo, and welcome to Her Scars Tell a Story podcast, a safe space for women from all different walks of life and different backgrounds coming together to share their stories of God's redeeming love. So grab your cup of coffee and journey with us now. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Her Scars Tell a Story podcast. I'm your host, Ann Calvillo, and today I'm with my wonderful guest, Michelle. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ann. Thank you for having me today.
I just want you to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Well, where do I start?
Anywhere you want.
So my name is Michelle Velasquez, and I'm a financial coach and founder of Virtuous Wealth Building. I am married to my husband, Martin Arteaga, and we have 4 beautiful children, all under the age of 9. And I always like to tell people, because that's like, people understand like how chaotic those stages are, right?
Yeah.
But a little bit about myself, my journey. So I recently just left my 9 to 5. I was an officer with Homeland Security for about 16 years. And I really felt God calling me to leave to be able to be a better mother. And I felt myself stressed out all the time. I felt myself stressed out in traffic, sometimes with my husband feeling like he was taking mom and dad roles. And I felt guilty. There was a lot of guilt involved in that. And so I was like, you know what? God's been asking me to leave. It took me a while, though. It took me like a year because it was fear.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm in this position, government position of 16 years and comfort, good pay, the schedule. You know, it's a mindset of like, hey, in law enforcement, you do 20 years and you retire.
Yeah.
So never did I ever think that I was ever going to leave prior to my 20 years. But I felt like God was constantly pursuing me. And I would see it in my kids and I would see it in my husband. And then I was just like, hey, this is not the mom that I want to be. I don't want to be the stressed out mom that by the time I got home, my kids wanted to do this. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm tired.
Yeah.
You know? And my husband like, babe, let's go on vacation. Let's do this. And I was just like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have leave. And so it was constantly like, it was stopping me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I finally got to the point that I started getting sick. I started getting physically sick. Things started happening to me. And I think it was a way of like God pausing me.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, I'm still going and I'm still going and I'm still going. And finally it was just like, came to this pause, like either you jump or you're going to have no choice. And so in that, I was like, okay, I need to do this for my kids. I need to do this for my husband, for my family, and for myself. So I just left the 9 to 5 to focus on the kids, but also to coach, because I felt like God was like, you know what, Michelle, you're good at this. You love coaching. You're passionate about it. People really need to hear your story. People really need to see the transformation, right? When I started my financial journey, it really started when my father passed. My father passed away in 2010.
Okay.
And when I cleaned out his office, I saw a financial book. And then I realized that he died of financial stress. And so, like, that was the beginning of my love for financial literacy.
Yeah.
And then you know, my husband and I, at the time when we first started, we had separate finances. And I would feel resentful. I was feeling resentful towards him because I felt like, oh, my God, I'm always broke and I have a good job. But I had debt because I had student loans. But I started to feel like resentful, like, wait, I'm the mom. I'm the one that shops. I'm the one that takes the kids to dentist, you know, clothes, grocery store, whatever. And so I kind of felt like I kept seeing him grow financially, and I felt a little behind. And so started to cause resentment. And so I really had to, like, address that.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, we have traumas that we grow up with, whether you have a spending, you know, you come up from parents who are spenders or savers. In our case, my husband and I had separate upbringings. And so we didn't trust each other with our money. So it was for like the first 5 years of our marriage that we just had separate finances. And
Yeah. How long have you been married for now?
so Martin and I have been married 7 years.
7 years. Yeah. Okay. So the first 5 were rough.
Yeah. The first 5 were, but I think it's because we came from, I was with someone else and, things didn't work out. And I had a lot of money trauma from that relationship.
Yeah.
And then my husband had a previous relationship. And so money trauma from them. And so then when you get together with someone, you don't realize like, hey, we both have some kind of financial trauma, money trauma.
Yeah.
And so how do we come together? How do we heal, right? How do we heal from that? And, it was really him who said, let's merge our finances. He went to a men's retreat actually at church. Uh-huh. And I remember him walking through the door and I was like, oh, how was the retreat? Like I had no idea. I was just asking about the retreat. Yeah. And he's like, let's have a seat on the couch. And he said, babe, in this retreat, God was telling me that I really needed to trust you 100%. He's like, there was something that I wasn't trusting you on.
Yeah.
And he was like, and it was with the money. And he said, and I felt like God was telling me that we would be more powerful together.
So let me ask you this. Did you both have separate bank accounts before that retreat?
We did. We had separate. We were like roommates. And I hated that feeling.
But speak into that because there's a lot of marriages that can relate to that.
Yeah. So, we got married, I'm 40 now. So it was a little late in the game. And at this point, you have your stuff, right? Like it's mine. And then he has his stuff and I had a property and he has a couple properties. And so then it comes to like, well, we have these unhealed previous relationships and upbringings, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we come to that? And so it really took prayer. It took conversations. Yeah. But I started to see, I don't think he did. Martin's really like relaxed. I was very resentful.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I'm feeling like this. This is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think that we don't talk about that how that can cause resentment when you have these separate accounts.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, you're buying another building and you're doing this and you're doing that. But hey, I'm the one that's going to the doctor, to the grocery store, to buy the school clothes, to do, and that, and I was carrying all the benefits, like the health benefits, dental.
Yeah.
So then one day I had to sit down and say, this is why I don't have money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, hey, it's going insurance and dental and FSA and HSA and everything else. So
yeah,
I wasn't able to build, but it's so important to merge. And he said, and my husband said, God wanted us to be together. And he said, I realized in the retreat that God was telling me that I wanted us to be together in everything, even with our money. And we were one.
Yes.
The oneness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So the reason why I mentioned that is because I just had a conversation with somebody on that. And in that, when you do merge, right? When you do merge and have that joint bank account, it's also keeping in mind that now we not only have a responsibility to be good stewards of that, but now we have to co-partner with our spouse in managing that money, and somebody needs to keep a budget on what's coming in and what's going out. How did you all handle that?
So I sat him on the island of our kitchen, and I remember, and I talk about this in my Facebook private group. I have a Facebook private group called Latina Moms Building Wealth, and I went live on it where it said I sat him down and I actually said to him, hey, this is what I have. And at the time, it was like, I don't know, $57,000. I had a total of about $88,000 in debt. I had a lot of student loan debt. I had about $3,000 in credit cards. But I sat down and it was very embarrassing, I think, because I knew that he was a cash kind of guy, a very saver. And I came from a very spending parents. Like my dad had a small business. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I grew up feeling like I had everything. So like for me, it was kind of embarrassing to be like, I have all this student loan debt because I felt embarrassed because as time passed, I realized like, wow, I was just lazy. I could have been putting for all these scholarships and all these things. And then later I became a judge for scholarships and we were struggling with getting people to apply for them. So then I was like, man, Michelle, like you were just lazy. You were lazy because you were comfortable. Your daddy had a business and you felt that you didn't have to do it. And so I think that I felt shamed to sit down with him at that table. But I had to face my fears and I had to face my numbers.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, I think I had about $3,000 in credit cards at the time. Yeah. And he was like, okay, we're going to be one. We're going to do this together. And we had a heart-to-heart conversation about like, hey, we have kids. Yeah. Like if we see this, we see each other together in the long haul. Yes. And we are married under God, like we are one, then we need to continue to work as one. And honestly, that was the beginning of like our power. Like we just, after that, we've been unstoppable.
That just gives me chills. I was having this conversation with a couple women, and we talked about where there's unity, there's blessing. Where there's unity, the blessing of the Lord flows there. There's scripture that actually talks about that. The blessing of the Lord flows there where there's unity. And just hearing you say, once we merged, once we were able to have that heart to heart, the power started there. The power and the healing.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
The financial healing that you talked about, right? And you had to release that embarrassment, right? Because when you're one with someone, when you're one with your spouse, right, there's no room for hiding, right? That's where we have to say, okay, we have to bring everything up, right? And it needs to be exposed and we need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Because in order for us to heal, we need to talk about it and not hide it under the rug or minimize it or wish it away. But we have to actually talk about it, right? And so that was really courageous of you and him.
And it was hard because most of the debt was mine. And I was like, you know, here I have $3,000 in credit cards, all these in student loans, you know. And I grew up with the father who owned a small business. My in-laws worked at Nabisco Cookie Factory. And so when I love to share that story because, you know, I admire them for being such hardworking people and being able to save. But it just goes to show that it's discipline. It's how we are stewards with our money, right?
Yes.
Versus like, you know, sometimes people are like, well, because you have money and your husband has a business and you have a business. No, it has nothing to do with that because there's people who are millionaires and then go bankrupt.
Right. And I also love that you did some self-inventory where you said, hey, Michelle, you're just being lazy. That's a hard truth. It's hard for us to be honest with ourselves in situations like that. We make excuses for ourselves, but you're just like, no, I could have, and I was being lazy, but admitting this is me facing it, is me acknowledging it.
I think a lot had to do with when my father passed away. He had a small business, successful business. And when it came down to numbers, my sisters I'm one of 5 sisters. When we sat down to pay for Dad's funeral, it was kind of like, well, where's the money? And I was like, how is it that we're like trying to figure this out now that he passed away? And so for me, it was really hard to not have money, you know, graduating from Loyola, having a master's, being in law enforcement, having a great career. And it's like, how do I not have enough money to help bury my father? The most important man in my life who gave me everything, right? And in that moment, I had to take out a loan from my retirement account to help because they're not waiting a month for the money. They want your money before the person gets buried. And so I think that was a reality. That was a rude awakening for me where it was like, I don't want my kids to ever feel this way. I remember crying in my room, and I'm part of the Latinos in Finanzas book, and I wrote it in my story. I remember vividly crying in my room saying, I don't ever want my kids to ever feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah. You're breaking cycles. You're breaking cycles now. Why? Because you made a choice. You made a choice and your husband made a choice. Tell us what that looks like now.
Wow. Now that we have merged, we eliminated, so it was about $88,000 in that. And this was like, we started our journey about 2015.
Okay.
I don't know, probably like 3-4 years. And, you know, sometimes people ask, and even as I coach couples, like, how does this happen? Yeah. Well, it happens is that when you have your separate accounts, you have your dinerito and your cuentita out in this way, you have it this way. And then, you know, it's like, wait a minute, we're $20,000 in debt, but you have 10,000 and I have 10,000. Like, right? What is? Yeah. And so we kind of had to really lay it all out. And then just build from there. You know, my husband was on board. I had a job that allowed me to work overtime. And I was like, I'm paying every penny. I want to change my family. I have the power to change the trajectory of my family and my kids. And I was just paying down the debt with overtime and husband. We worked hard for it. And then we just started to buy properties, and, you know, he's in construction. So we started to renovate homes, and we started to flip and make money that way. And so now, you know, he just got certified for his minority business certification. And so not only were we flipping homes for clients, but now for ourselves.
Yeah.
Now it has allowed me to leave the 9-to-5, $120,000 job that I was in, to feel that freedom, right? Of now I want to be able to do what I want with my kids, with my business, and you know, and grow Virtuous Wealth Building. And, you know, we just have so many plans. We want to do a foundation. There's just so many plans that we have, but I'm actually rolling out, you know, you said I have changing the legacy. I'm rolling out a series of 4 books called The Dinero Kids. The first time I say it, The Dinero Kids. And so that's going to roll out hopefully at the end of August. And it's a series of 4 books for children. Wow. Because I feel like we need to start talking about money and making it normal.
Yes.
And not feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about money because I don't want to have money. No, I want to have a lot of money. I want to have money. I want to have the ability to give to those that I can't, you know, those that don't have. I want to be able to like build. There's so much that I want to do for others more than for myself.
Yeah.
Right?
And it takes money. Yeah.
And you know, sometimes as Christians, we're like, oh, well, it's because I feel bad and I don't want to charge. No, like you have a gift and you need to monetize. God doesn't want you broke. And I think sometimes like people want to make you feel guilty because you have a gift and a talent and you're monetizing, right? One thing is to take advantage of someone and not produce or not give the transformation but another thing is like, hey, this is a talent and I'm giving you a transformation.
Yeah.
Right. And so, hey, I'm able to monetize.
Yeah.
Because I have goals and gifts, you know, and just visions that God has put in my heart that I want to continue to do. And the only way for me to do it is to have money.
Yeah. We're blessed to be a blessing, right? And I believe you can look at that spiritually. You can look at that emotionally. You can look at that even monetary. When I heard you at the women's conference, you would say, I want to bless the community. I want to bless whoever it is that the Lord puts in your path to bless. Can you tell us in what ways have you seen that you know, because they talk about that requires discipline too. In what ways do you feel like you had to sacrifice, cut back, and be more disciplined in saving your money?
Wow. So I grew up with a dad who had a small business. So with that is there was never a budget or a limit. It was like, you want this, we go on vacation, you want that, the car, whatever. So there was never like, you can't have. And so my husband actually is the one that, you know, in communication and conversation is like, babe, like you can't be spending so much money on this. And, you know, so I had to switch that mindset of like, okay, I want to learn from my situation that happened with my dad. And then I see my husband and his upbringing. And so like, what did we like?
Yeah.
What we did not like, and what can we do for our family?
Yeah.
And so, and sometimes it's like, it's okay to just take what we think worked.
Yeah.
And not feel guilty. Like, well, I'm not exactly like my mom.
Right.
Right? Like, okay, my dad would always say, like, you should be better than me. Like when, you know, going to college and going to like, hey, be better than me.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's how we've taken that approach of like, let's be better. But in regards to my cutback, I've had to budget, which I never did before. Like that was not even that wasn't even a word.
Yeah.
I was really like, I want to pay down these houses because what I value, and I always talk about values with clients, like, hey, what is it that you value?
Yeah.
And so I value security. And I value security because of my situation and how I grew up with that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I don't ever want to feel like I'm going to lose my home or I'm never going to have enough. So for me, security is like big.
Yeah.
I'm not a big risk taker. I am a risk taker because you have to take risks. But I'm very analytical. I think because of my job.
Yeah.
I'm very analytical. And so for me, now I'm just very analytical with things. And I've had to not only budget for myself, but like for my kids. Like we went to Michael's yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you each have $10, and I always tell them, you can put it together and buy something for all of you,
Okay.
or you can just spend it on yourself. And then, Joe would be like, Mommy, Joe's 5. Is this enough? Is this enough?
So cute.
And so then I was like, okay, Poppy, how much is that? $7.99. Yes, plus that. And then Michael's the coupon. So I teach them like, hey, if you're coming to Michael's, you need to have a coupon, right?
Love it.
And so now, not only for myself to cut back, but now to teach them and not feel guilty, because I think as parents, we feel a sense of guilt. Like, I, at least more through clients, I've heard like, oh, well, it's because, whether the single parents or like, I didn't have that and I want them to have it and I don't want them to feel that way. But I'm also like, well, what are you teaching them?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I see that right now with my oldest, he's a little privileged. And so my husband and I sometimes have to have the conversations like, Marty, like, you should be more grateful. Let's talk about gratitude.
Yeah.
Let's be grateful. And so then we have to talk to them about like, hey, not everybody has this. This is what we have. And so then Marty's like, okay, Mommy, like, now they understand.
Right. So that they don't grow up with the sense of entitlement, like you owe it to me. And then they think that wherever they go, they're owed something. Right.
Right.
I love that you're teaching them while they're little. And I love this new series you're going to have. What is it? Dinero?
The Dinero Kids?
Yeah, the Dinero Kids. I love that.
Kids.
I love that. So it seems like you focus on, is it families as far as coaching, or is it, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it started with like, I felt like God was putting in my heart. I started with coaching women. Okay. That was my vision, like when I initially started the business. But as I started to coach, these women some of them are married, right? So like, I actually have coached more couples than women by themselves. Yeah. And so I mostly coach Latino families. I do feel that God has put it in my heart to coach Latino families because they need to see someone like them, right? Like when I look for a coach, I want to see a Latina successful coach that has a transformation. Like that's what I want. Somebody that looks like me. Yeah. Right. And so, that's kind of my niche, Latino families. I'm very passionate about it. I love it. I can proudly say that I have been 100% successful with helping couples get on the same page and working together, even if they had separate finances.
Oh man, that's huge, Michelle. Because again, you hear of a lot of marriages having their separate accounts. And so for them to come together, that's huge. What do you think is the key motivator behind that?
I think that it's a lack of, one, unhealed trauma, mindset. It's first unhealed trauma. Second is mindset. Like, oh, wow, I don't think I could do it. Or I once had a client that I said, hey, I would like for you to save X amount of money in this time. And she was like, Michelle, I don't think that I can do that. And I said, yes, you can. And I said, you can do that. You're gifted. You're a professor. You're talented. Figure out ways. Let's think of creative ways of how we can make extra money. 2 weeks later, she called me and she said, Michelle, I already have the money that you told me that you think I should save. So it was a mindset. It wasn't that she could not save. Yeah. It was that she had to shift her thinking of, okay, what can I do with the talent that I do have?
Right.
And who's willing to pay for that? Right?
Yeah. When you said it's really, truly how we steward even the little that we have, right? Because we think like, oh, I have to have like thousands of dollars in my bank savings account, but it's how we manage even the little that we have. How do you make your money work for you? I've heard that, make your money work for you. What does that look like?
Well, when I had the 9 to 5 and I just left last week, but having a good income was learning to take control of the money that you are making. Okay. So in that season, I had a great salary, and so let's budget what I do have and how can we make more? So what we were doing is we were saving for down payments for the next property and the next property. And then we started we have 2 Airbnbs right now. And so now we're going to have a few more. So the money that we were having is like taking control and eliminating some debt, being able to use that and make more. Now monetizing the books, like rolling out the series of the 4 books. Yeah. And so, yes, it was a big investment up front, but I know that eventually the money will come and I'll work on partnerships. But now it's me not having to work as hard. Yes, I had to sit down a couple times and go through these books and revisions and images and illustrations, right?
Yeah.
But now every time that it sells, I don't have to work as hard anymore, right? So you want to wake up to like a cha-ching. Like when I go to the bathroom sometimes and I'm like, what time is it? I look at my phone and it's like, there's money in your account, or like an Airbnb just booked, or like whatever. It's like, oh, it's nice. Like to just wake up to see that without having to work as hard. Sure, in the beginning, you have to put the Airbnb together, buy the beds, make it look nice, take care of the guests or whatever. But now it's not as hard. I don't have to work as hard. So it's like work hard one time, and then just let it flow.
What would you say to that single woman who lives paycheck to paycheck and says, you know what, I don't have the help of a husband. Can I also learn to manage my money and make my money work for me?
Absolutely. I think it's a mindset, right? And it's a mindset of I can't. Instead of saying I can't is how can I?
Okay.
So switch that mindset when you feel like, oh, I can't. Well, how can I do this? And I use this example when I teach the workshop. And I always say, if I was your best friend and I was to ask you, let's go on a trip to Hawaii, and I would say, hey, can you afford it? Most people would probably say no. Like, no, Michelle, I can't afford it. So let's change that. Hey, how much do I need to go to Hawaii? If you bake cakes, how many cakes do I need to sell to go on this trip? How many hours of overtime do I need to work to do this? How else can I make money? So instead of when you say, no, I can't, you shut your brain. And you stop thinking. But the person that's like, oh, no, I know I can't, but how can I? Now your mind, you're just on thinking nonstop.
It seems so simple. It seems so simple. But I think it's, like you said, it is a mindset. And the Bible talks about renewing our mind, right? A lot of us, we're living on default mode or autopilot, right? Which tells us, I have never saved like this before. I don't even know what that looks like. No, I can't do it. But it's through coaching classes, right, that you're helping people to renew their mindset as well as learn how to be good stewards, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's amazing. As I was listening to you share your story, what I'm still drawn to is how your husband went to a men's retreat through the church. Through the church, right? Tell us, what role does God have in all of this?
A huge role. Like, oh my God. Like, if God hadn't put it in my heart, well, let me go back to the beginning of the story. And sometimes I feel awkward sharing it, but I was in a previous relationship before my husband that I thought that was the guy I was going to marry. And I got to tell you that in that season, I was very broken because it was the same season that my father had passed away. But man, had he not done that to me, I wouldn't have met my amazing husband. I would not have the life that I have now. And so from that beginning, God was always with me. And even in that darkest season, I even had to leave Chicago. I went to Georgia to teach at the Federal Law Enforcement Academy. I went to go teach because I needed to get away. Right? But in that, like, as I look back, I was like, wow, God was taking care of me in that brokenness where I felt abandoned. Like he was just there the entire time. And so that God has been with me since the beginning. And so all along through my journey, he was planting seeds and preparing me to then be the coach, because I would have never left my career. I loved my job. I would have never left. Right. But as I started to have my kids and I started to see my husband, I also know that my husband has so much potential as the business owner that he is, that I felt like I was taken away from him. And I had to take a step back. And I was like, man, my husband is bright, smart. He's amazing. And so I was like, I needed to step back for him now to shine, because it's hard for both of you. We can both shine.
Yes.
But just not at the same time. And we have this thing where we say, who's driving? Right? Like in the season when I opened Virtuous Wealth Building, I was driving. I had a ton of events. I started networking, whatever. My husband's business was established. In the season, I've already built the business. Right? And so now it's like he just got his minority certification. Now he's driving. And now I know that I'm going to help him grow. I left the job to help take care of my own family empire. But in this, God has been in everything.
Yes.
Because let me tell you, my personality, my alpha, to have to humble myself and take a step back, right? Even with my husband, where I would always be like, I don't need a man to take care of me. I got it. I can have myself. Like, for me, having that job was always that security blanket.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, you know, today, jokingly, my kids got Domingo. And so on Sundays, we give them a Domingo. And I told the boys, is Papi done with Domingos? Yeah. And so Marty's like, no, Mommy didn't get her Domingo, and she works hard, you know? So
you just brought me back old school. My grandpa used to say, bang, bang, tu Domingo.
So Marty's like, Mommy, you work so hard. Papi now needs to start giving you a Domingo. I said, he sure does. And I turned around and he's like, here, babe, this is for you. I was like, okay, thank you. You know? Yeah. But in that, God has been in it the entire time. And even in the darkest moments, he was already planting seeds for me until where I am today.
I love what you just said, how, you know, you take turns to shine, right? And it's true that in a marriage, right, you will notice that in seasons where you're going through things, your husband's able to be that support, that backbone that you need, right? Or seasons where he's going through things and you're able to support him and encourage him. And there is a lot of strength and growth in humility. You said, I had to humble myself. Do you know that it takes just as much strength, just as much time to grow in humility that it does when we feel like we're at our top of the game, they call it, right? But it takes that much to also humble ourselves and say, okay, God, I see what you're doing in my husband, and I'm going to be there to encourage him and watch him grow too, as you're growing me in this season, as I'm humbling myself.
And let me tell you one thing. I'm not sure if we're ending that, but even at the very end, it took me a year after I felt that God was like, Michelle, you need to leave this job. I was like, not yet, Lord. Like, I have this to do, and I have this to do. And I had like this whole checklist. And it took me a year, okay? Because I'm a control freak. And I was like, no. And God kept telling me, no, I'm in control. And I was like, no, but I got this. I have all this, right? And so even at the end, he was still in control because I had all my doctors, all the dental, everything that I had on my checklist to do. And at the very end, I had given my notification to my employers that I was leaving. And I said, hey, I'm leaving by the 30th. And then I get this email of a mammogram. And it was like, hey, your mammogram came irregular. And so we need a follow-up. And it's not till September 5th. Yeah. And I was like, oh, my God, what am I going to do? And I was like, how about if something is wrong with me? How about if, like, now I'm leaving my medical? Like, how about if all this? And I was like, nope. And I really felt that God was testing me to be like, here, Michelle, here you thought that you had your whole checklist done. But till the very end, even after you already submitted your resignation, I'm still in control of the situation. Yeah. And so I had to make a decision. Yeah. I had to make a decision of either I find a plan B or I had to trust God. And I was like, okay, God, I am trusting you. This is like truly trust and walking in faith that you are going to take care of me. And if you have called me to do this, you are going to get me through this. And so my second mammogram is not till September 5th. But I feel at peace. Yes. I do. Because I was like, you know what? I walked out in faith. I know he's going to take care of me. And I'm not going to continue to allow to feel like the devil was always distracting me. Something would happen or nothing would happen. And it was the health and it was something or the other. And that's what kept me there. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of feeling like that because now I was going to work not feeling like myself anymore. And so I had to, even till the end, you said, where is God playing? He's, till now, he's been in control.
He's there. He's the one that's in control, right? Even when we think that we're in control, it's him, right? It's like saying, Lord, you take the reins. You're only you, Lord. My health is in your hands. My family is in your hands. My job, this coaching, it's all in your hands, right? And that takes humbling ourselves, which again, there's strength and growth in humbling ourselves and saying, God, you got this. right? We're used to saying, hey, girl, you got this, but really God's got me. God's got me in this season of my life because there's things that are out of my control, things that I cannot control, but I'm choosing to trust the Lord. And I'm just grateful that you shared that part of your testimony because, again, many women can relate to you, Michelle. Many women have gotten that call or a diagnosis and suddenly life is turned upside down, but I see in you this trust in the Lord. I see in you a peace. And even when you shared, you shared that with us, you still you had this peace, even weeks or months ago, right? Man, praise God. Praise God, because that's a test in itself, right? And I believe that will still be part of your testimony as to what God continues to do in your life. Please speak to our listeners right now who can relate to your story, who may feel hopeless right now, who may feel helpless. Please share, what words of encouragement or advice you would have for someone right now.
So I always say, take it to God. When I felt in my darkest moment, I remember, and his name is Ever Gutierrez, and I'll say his name. He was a very near and dear college friend. Also, he's a motivational speaker. But Everett and I really good college friends. I called him one day, and I was just telling him, like, this dark season that I was in. And I said, Everett, this is what I'm feeling. And he said to me, you need to hang up the phone, and you need to take it to God.
Yeah.
And so for that woman that is feeling that way, that's what I want to tell you. After this podcast, you need to get on your knees, you need to surrender, and you need to take it to God. And so whatever it is that you need to let go, cry it out, shake it off, whatever you need to do, that's what I would start. But I also always talk about partnering up with God. And it's not just, reading your Bible. It's not just, listening to the pastor, but it's taking the time to pause and listen. Because as I was going through the season of I was struggling with feeling disobedient because in the last year, I'm like, I know God had called me to leave and I had this whole checklist, but that was my mental struggle. Yeah. I was struggling because I knew that I was being disobedient.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, God, but I'm going to be obedient and I'm going to be obedient. And just things would start to happen until finally God was like, no, you need to take a step.
Yeah.
And so it's not only to pause, but also to obey and act. And it's hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's hard. Just jumping what I just did last week, despite the medical and despite everything, it's been hard. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, when I did it, I felt the sense of 100 pounds off me.
Yes.
I felt the sense of release. And let me tell you, the day that I stepped into obedience, my husband and I had put a house on the market. And one thing or another with the buyers, we went back and forth, whatever. It's been 4 months.
Yeah.
The next day, my husband got a message from the attorney saying the house has a clear to close. The next day. That's the first good news we got the next day. The second was when he got his minority certification for the business. So it was I felt that God was still I still have you. And then the following day, I got a new client out of nowhere, which I wasn't taking any more clients for the month of August. And this woman was just I really want to get coached by you. I've been following you. I met you at a conference, blah, blah, blah. And so I saw her being desperate. And she was just I really need this. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And so that was just wow. God, financially, I'm taking care of you. I'm taking care of your husband. You guys are growing. It was just no matter what, I still felt in the moment that I stepped into obedience, I felt the blessing immediately. It wasn't in a month. And it was the next day.
That's amazing, right? That's the Lord. I mean, he's just so good. Going back to what you were saying, the blessing in obedience, the blessing in humility, the blessing in surrender, the blessing in giving it to God, right? It speaks volumes to the woman who thinks, I have to have it all together. I have to have control, right? And you're saying, cry it out, pray it out, give it to God. Michelle, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest today. Please let our listeners know where they can contact you, what platforms, how they can reach out to you.
So my website is www.vwbcoaching.com, and that's for Virtuous Wealth Building, coaching.com. I am on Facebook and on Instagram, more so on Facebook, but now that I left the 9 to 5, you'll see me a little bit more on Instagram. I do have a Facebook private group called the Latina Moms Building Wealth.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that
that's the one I'm on, I believe.
That's the one you're on.
I love it.
And so I'll be rolling out the Dinero Kids soon, the series for your kids. But my email is info@vwbcoaching.com.
All right. And that series for kids, are these books or is it videos?
It's 4 books that we will be rolling out. The first book, I'll give you the title. It's The Spending for Chiquis' birthday. It's my daughter's birthday, and her 3 brothers bought her a surprise gift.
I love that.
So each of my kids has a book.
And are these in English, Spanish, bilingual?
They will be bilingual.
Bilingual.
They will be bilingual.
Okay.
And we're finishing the final stages, and they should be published by the end of August.
Okay. And what age group are they geared toward?
They're geared toward like 5 to 10-year-olds.
Okay. All right. So moms, I hope you're getting excited because I could have sure used those books when my kids were little. But again, Michelle, thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and stay tuned for our next episode of Her Scars Tell a Story.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.